Look at this belt.
You want it?
Let's see. I don't know if the camera will be able. This thing's heavy. This is
I
like
know
a
it is.
WWE
Legit.
legit The Rock Johnson belt. It's heavy.
Yeah.
So our 16U team, which is the 2008s, won their tournament over the weekend, and that was their trophy. Was this belt? And it looks like in the picture, it looked like a little bit Mickey Mouse. And then Miles brought it today because they want to take some pictures of it and stuff.
Sure.
And so he's like, "Man, hold this thing." So I pick it up. I'm like, "Holy Jesus,
It's legit.
it's legit. It's a legit belt." So, anyways,
Who did they play in the finals?
They played. I don't even remember. It was a French. I don't know if it was an academy, a AAA program. I don't know. They beat Beltire to go to the finals.
Okay.
So that team I know, and then I don't remember the name of it. It was a French team. I don't know. But anyways, they're doing well, so it's good.
Yeah, they are doing well.
Okay, so my episode this week, or my idea for this episode, my thoughts. So I ran the Detroit half marathon on Sunday.
Yeah, I know.
Mac did the full marathon. So
he had a banana at the end.
Yeah, they gave me a banana. You know what was fun? They gave me it's like a heat wrap blanket. It's like a piece of foil. You ever seen these?
Yeah, I have.
So like heavy insulating. It's super thin,
really?
But it's like it's like wearing a garbage bag almost, but it's almost like foil. It's like I don't know. So anyways, it's like crazy warm. Makes
Just
no
to
sense.
Keep the heat in.
Yeah, after you're done, you get over the finish line and
It was a nice day too, right?
Yeah, it's a great day. So we run over the Ambassador Bridge, which is super cool. Then you go through the tunnel, which you can't breathe in there at all. And then you have the incline, sneaky incline of the, not sneaky of the bridge, but the tunnel sneaky incline. Like you don't realize how inclined it is coming out of the tunnel.
Oh, that's a nice steady grade.
Oh yeah. So I hadn't any of my runs I've done. Like I've been running like I've said on the podcast a couple times, I couldn't really train the way I wanted to train for it. So like all of the runs I was doing were on a treadmill basically just because I had to be in the building here.
Yeah.
And then I know I'd only done 3 or 4 runs. I only did one run over 16 kilometers, I think, in the whole like training cycle, which was not enough volume. So I could feel it after I hit like kilometer 15, my legs were starting to feel it. So I crossed the finish line, and first thought that enters my head is like, Mac is running this race right now, and he has to do what I just did again.
Yeah.
Insane. So anyway, kudos to him for doing the full thing, man. That's wild. So, but it was like super cool event. Anyways, it got me thinking. Like I was reflecting on the training thing, which we talked about like intermittently while it's been building up to doing the run, and I'm thinking like leading up to it because I still have to work a lot and I'm gone most of my weekends and whatever. I couldn't optimize my performance day. Like I couldn't peak the way I wanted to peak because I couldn't train enough. I couldn't schedule enough. Like all that stuff was not the way I needed it to be. And so I started reflecting back to just like playing hockey games and the travels between this travel schedule, the sleep schedule, the school demands and all these other things that are going on. Like how hard it actually is to perform when you need to perform. And I think the reason I want to talk about it, because I'm sure if people put some thought into this, they would agree, but it's so difficult to actually perform at the highest level against the highest level when you need to, like when it's the time to do it. Like you don't get to say, oh, I feel perfect today, let's perform. It's like, no, your game's Sunday. So however you feel, that it doesn't matter. Like that's when you have to do your game, right? So for me, I wake up on Sunday morning at 4:00. The race starts at 7:00. I'm looking at my Whoop. I got like a 39% recovery because we're on the road for games the 2 days before that. Not eating the way I want to, not sleeping the way I want to. The training schedule up to that was not the way I wanted to. And then it's like, it doesn't matter. 7:00, it starts. It doesn't matter. You have to figure out how to perform. And for me, I was thinking about how grateful I am now that it doesn't matter how I do. Like I'm not trying to perform
because you're
physically.
Not playing for anyone.
Yeah,
or whatever.
I'm not a hockey player anymore. I'm not trying to play for the Red Wings. My race was like, if I do poorly or okay or great, it doesn't matter. Like it's just, I don't have to have that competitive drive to do a great job when I'm performing at anything anymore from a physical standpoint. It doesn't matter to my life goals now, other than I care about being healthy and all that shit, which that matters. But if I don't win the race or I don't win the game or I don't it doesn't matter. And so when we're talking about for these young kids that are inexperienced, don't have any of their routine set, are trying to figure it out, and kids up to, let's say, 20 years old or whatever, the expectations on them being able to perform optimally is almost unfair to a degree because of how hard it is to actually put forth your best in circumstances that you can't control. I have 2 games in a day. I have a long bus road or a long bus trip. I have whatever thing is that's making it challenging.
Yeah, your parents are in control of how you get there. Parents in control of what you do during the week. Like you could say you want to go to bed at certain times and all this stuff. Eat the right way, but if your mom and dad are making meals and driving you around all over the place and taking on their schedule, of course. But eating, you want to eat healthy and they can't afford it, or they just don't have the time to make the right meals and stuff. Yeah, everything adds up.
Or even just they don't know the information. So it's like it's one thing if you're a top end athlete and you know how you're supposed to eat and sleep and fuel and all these things and you choose to not do that, that's one thing. But if you're young and you don't even know the information, but your coaches, your parents, whoever, your agent, your advisor, whatever it is, like are expecting you to perform at your best, when a lot of them don't even know what that means or what that takes or whatever. And even for people that have played high level or have played pro or in the NHL or whatever sport, if it's a different sport where they've been a high performer, it's not that they necessarily knew either. It's like sometimes it's not even in their awareness. Like it's like by accident they did the right things and they felt good when they played or not or whatever. It's like so it's not even like it's a they know what they did, right?
So I think if you listen to Wayne Gretzky's interviews, and that's just one of many, right? One of many people. I mean, is before every game he had Diet Coke and a couple hot dogs. I'm going to say it's probably not optimal.
Right.
Fuel.
So that's exactly what I'm saying. So it's
guys
like,
used to smoke darts in the dressing room. Probably not optimal.
But even now, like you go to whatever, if you're playing in college or something like that, and like you have your school meal plan thing that you follow as part of your, like you go to the cafeteria or whatever it is where you get your meals, and it's like whatever's there, you're gonna eat whatever's there. And do you know the difference between this and that? Do you know the difference between this and how it is going to affect your performance? So I guess like my point and like the rabbit hole thing that I kind of want to go down is as the people that have the expectations, whether it's the scouts, the coaches, the parents, the whatever, or down to the players even, but for this conversation, I'm thinking more the people that would be the ones judging the performance. Remember or try to keep in mind what standard you're holding the kids to. And that doesn't mean to not hold a high standard, but just to have some awareness about how hard it actually is to perform at your best consistently. It's really hard to do, man. Like consistency is like, it's one of the hardest things, and most of the time the guys that end up being the pros or the high level of the high level are the guys that could figure out how to be consistent and perform at their best the most amount of times, because you put a group of guys out there that are NHL caliber players or whatever, they're all in the mix in terms of skill level, you know. So why can this guy do it and this guy can't? It's like, well, maybe there's intangibles that you can't account for. Like some kid just gets it. He just has the IQ, whatever. But another way of looking at it is these guys just figured out how to consistently perform at their best the most amount of times in a row. And like, that's really hard to do. And when we have expectations on players or just even your kids in general, it doesn't even have to be hockey, just like performing at school or performing at another thing that they're interested in. It's just keeping in mind like how hard it actually is to do, and I think sometimes we can take for granted that they should just be able to do it, or we forget that we never did it, or we don't do it, or we don't even know how we would do that, but we still enforce this high standard, which I like the high standard, and should want them to achieve a high standard and hold them accountable to a high standard, but there has to be some degree of reasonableness to allow them a little bit of play in the joints of like, hey, sometimes they don't have it figured out or sometimes they can't be consistent for whatever reason, and just having some thoughts around that. So like, I guess throwing it to you because I've been yapping is when like let's take your position as dad when you're looking back on, or well, let's do it this way. How do you think about for younger players, so even up to 20 years old, it doesn't have to be the 5-year-old, even up to 20 years old, playing junior, playing whatever. How do you think about that concept of being able to perform optimally? And then how do you balance from the dad perspective or the coach perspective, the like giving the kids some grace of not being at their best or not being able to perform optimally or whatever? Like, what are your thoughts about that generally from the dad perspective or the coach perspective when you're watching?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that theory of, if you when you're looking at consistency, yes, there's a consistency that you would want and need from a player, no matter who, no matter what, and you've got to realize that. And I think a lot of us get very guilty of this, is when you see the best performance of a player, that's what you use as your standard, is that's what's good, right? Where, and then if you see like the ass end of that, so you're just dog shit that day, one day, then that's the other extreme. But you probably got 30% of 30% of, or you try to be less than 30% for sure, of the dog shit. You'd love to be more than 30% on the high end greatness, but somewhere in the middle lies who you really are, right? And that, I think that would take account for, whether you're feeling great or you're feeling you're recovered, you're not, or whatever. I think you could still have games where you're just playing your optimal in the middle, right? And in the middle doesn't mean you're just average. It just means like there's games where when your skating is just, you've been on the ice like that, right? You get on the ice and you just get on the ice and the ice feels great. Everything feels okay. Oh, I'm skating really well today. The puck touches you and it's great. You're alive. Your energy is great, and then everything you do is just bang on. And you might have points or hits, whatever it is that you do really well, but everything is flowing. And you might be player of the game or some sort of whatever you want to call that, but you're outstanding that day. And that's the thing you want to be careful of, is don't, that's nice to have, but don't figure that that's what you have every single game, unless you have that every game. So if you like, and I think a lot of times players and coaches and dads included will look at that game, that high end game, and say, okay, that's what you are, son, or whatever. That's what you are. That's where you should be playing every day. You're that good. You got to bring it every day. It's like, okay, but that's the best you can be, right? And then obviously the opposite end is the dog shit end, when you're not feeling it. I mean, I remember, I don't know if I said this before. I remember one of my teachers in high school wanted to come to one of our games, and I said, "Yeah, I'll get you some tickets tonight." So we were playing at home against Kitchener, and I was mentally like, just, I was playing really well normally, anyways. But this game comes on, and I'm like fired up, and I got one of my teachers here. That's kind of cool, and to talk to him every day because I didn't do any of the schoolwork. But anytime that puck was near me, it was like the weirdest thing. It was, I couldn't make a flat pass. I couldn't make a. Everything was just bobbling just a little bit, and I'm like, I thought I played horrible. He said, "Oh man, you're a good player," and I'm like, that nothing felt right. But I can't use that as my right. So yeah, so you got to know that's going to happen. You're going to have games where you're flatter than piss on a platter. Yeah. You're going to have games where you're the, no one can touch you.
Yeah.
But that's what you have to figure out, is like coaches, players. You got to figure out, okay, like the highs are high, the lows are low, but somewhere in the middle, you want to have the consistency. So that again goes back to, you've got your identity of 3, 4, 5 things that you need to do every day. What type of player are you? How do you do it? Right? I'm a goal scorer. I'm a creative player, whatever. So are you creating plays? I'm a power forward. Are you finishing your hits? You getting pucks out? You get into the net? Stuff like that. Are you an offensive defenseman? Are you carrying the puck out, making plays? If you're a defensive defenseman, right? Are you shutting down, boxing out, getting pucks out? So the habits are going to tell you if you where you're at on those things. Right? Some days you do it at a higher level. Some days you don't. So and sometimes, no matter what you do, right? I've had so many days where I was like, even in the gym these days, I'll feel like, maybe some days I just feel like I'm dragging my ass, but my recovery on my whoop says I'm at like a high end. Well, that's weird. Some days I feel like I feel great, but my recovery seems really low. Some days I walk to the gym, I'm like, I don't know, and it's like, start working out, and it's like, wow, you were good today. And then another day you feel great, and you walk into the gym, you start, you go, I just don't have it today. It's weird. It's a weird thing. So it's about, but so even that, it's about just doing it, right? Doing it over and over.
Yeah. Well, I like the because we've talked about that like a while ago. I remember us talking about that how your your average the average of how you play is going to be your average. So when you have that high end game where you were just firing, the temptation again as the coach, as the parent, as the people judging are going to be like that's the bar. Like that's where you need to be every game. That's how you need to play every game. It's like that is actually not possible. It's actually not possible. Because if they could do that every game, they would do that every game. That would be the consistent level that they're at.
Yeah.
So
Gretzky, Lemieux, McDavid, Crosby, all
yeah,
those guys would have 5-6 point nights every night.
yeah, right. So for them, that's them, right? That is their average. Their average is that good. But for most kids, when they have their standout game, resist. I guess that's kind of my take home, like the thread that I'm kind of following is like resist the urge to enforce their absolute best as the bar that needs to be there every game because and I'm not saying you would ever say this necessarily, but that is like the common parlance of how about that, eh?
So
Parlance.
you don't use that word
Why
very
did I
often.
think of that word?
You're just on that.
Yeah, on
You're
that
above
level.
average on your speaking
Yeah.
today.
But I think that's the common line, right? It's like you need to be at your best every single day. You need to be at your best, and like we even say that, like you need to be at your best every single day to give yourself the best chance at being successful or moving on or whatever. And though that's true, we need to be clear about what your best actually is. And your best isn't going to be the off standout game where everything just went right and you just had everything dialed in perfectly and that is your absolute best. It's like that is your absolute best, but is that your best every day? And for most kids that's not what their best is going to be every day. And the goal over time is to raise the line of what your consistent level is every day. So if you are constantly holding your kid or your players to something that is not realistic for them to actually sustain every day, then I think you start to lose track of what you can actually expect from them. So if you see your kid, the kid has like this phenomenal game, and you're like, see, I see you can do it. Like I know you got it in there.
Or why don't you just do that every game?
Yeah,
You're that's what you are, dude.
yeah, exactly. And
That's not
I want to
fair.
like thread the needle too because like I said at the same time it's like you want to hold them to the highest standard possible. I guess I'm saying more internally. Like I'm not suggesting this as messaging to the player because I think my messaging would still be those things like this is what you got to shoot for, like this is what you want to raise to, this is what you want to be every day. I think that's all good messaging. But for yourself internally, like when you're judging the player or when you're judging the athlete or the kid on your team or whatever, be realistic in your judgment of what's actually attainable,
Well, but
So
that's why it's important that you have your identity, right? Not like an identity like you can't step out of it, but it's an identity of the ideal of what that player is.
do
So
you
if you go ahead,
do you get what I'm saying though? Like the difference between me saying like all the messaging I'm giving right now, the difference between saying that to a player and you just knowing it and being aware of it
yeah,
as the
you're
coach.
never gonna tell a guy like, um, if you're not great today, just make sure you're average, eh?
Yeah, like
Like
I'm
so,
trying to
like
figure out a way to
no. What you're doing is like, of course you're gonna do that. You're gonna you always have to demand excellence. You always have to demand someone's best, and push and nudge people to be their best. Because what would happen is just like practice today with the groups that I had today. If I'm not, so let's just, a lot of the focus was on a lot of different passing sequences that turn into shots, which where I want good shots, but the passing and the foot movements had to be very good. And so the passing was what I was really focusing on. And like if they're not feeling it today, it's not okay to say, yeah, I know you guys are probably just off a little bit. So
yeah,
no,
right,
because
right.
you can still make a great pass.
Yes.
Right? It might not be um, right. Anyways, you could still do the skill of making a great pass. Very, very few and far between. If you're focused and you're a good player, you should make shitty passes. So that's like stuff like that. You should always expect the best from them, and then have high expectations, but understand that they might not be there 100%.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Right. And
That's okay.
that's
I think I answered it for you.
yeah,
But
like
yeah, no,
I
for
don't want
sure.
the messaging to be like a big contradiction, because on the one hand I'm saying understand that they can't really achieve that every day, but then on the other hand, it's like me personally, I would consistently message like, "Hey man, I've seen you do this thing in the game. I know you can do it. I need you to do it more." You know, like that is fair messaging, while at the same time if it's a kid that might be more limited for some reason, I'm also in my head being aware that okay, I'm pushing this kid to try to raise that bar, but how I feel towards this player is not going to be that. Like, I'm not going to be holding them to this bar in my head every day because I know their consistent level is going to be below that. But my messaging to them is going to be make sure we're striving to keep raising that bar. Because then I think that's where you'll start to draw a really fine line as a coach between being like firm but fair, you know, where it's like you're always giving them a fair assessment and a fair expectation based on where they're at, but you're also giving them that firm push to make sure they're still striving and achieving. Like I just had a meeting with a kid this morning where we were kind of doing that. We were talking about more from an academic standpoint than hockey, but nonetheless, it's like, hey, we know you need some supports in certain ways, but I also know that you can pick it up. Like you can do your part to be better, right? Like you can raise the bar of what you're doing academically from where you're at, you know? So I want to, I'm
But
trying
this,
to,
this see, here's the thing, though, right? Because this is just to me, this is true. You might not have your best game, but pick a position. Go ahead. Right wing. Okay. The right winger, whether you're having a great game or a bad game, the results or the expectations that is when the puck comes on that wall and there's a battle or it comes to your wall to go out, you need to make the right decision or execute it. You have to do it. So whether you do it at your best or at your worst, that's your expectation. So it doesn't matter how you feel. It doesn't matter anything. That's what your expectations are. So if you're at your best, it's probably coming out most of the time. If you're at your middle ground, it's probably coming out most of the time because that's your job, or maybe a little bit less than 100%. But and if you're at your worst, you still are supposed to get that puck out. Maybe your skating's not as good, but that puck needs to get out. For example, if it doesn't come out over and over, then you're just on a bad game. You don't actually deserve to play. 1 second. The old girl always thinks I'm available, right? So the habits that you have to do. It doesn't mean that because you're not having a great, like you're at the, let's say the bottom third of your uh, expectations or your performance, you're at the lower level. That doesn't mean that you can't backcheck. You still have to backcheck. You still have to do the habits. So I think the most important thing is you have habits. Do your habits. They might not that you might bobble a puck more, but your habits have to be the same. You know what I mean? So and then even saying that, like, so it's like that gives you a level playing field of what you can kind of control. True, right? Like sometimes you can't control who you play with. Sometimes you can't control maybe you're like you said the recovery is high, low, whatever. Sometimes you can't control necessarily that, but you can control your habits. You know, it doesn't change that when you get the puck's over the red line, if you're maybe not that creative or can handle a puck, that you dump it in the corner the right way, right? Like those are habits. And then the other side of it is the other thing you can control, even though like your parents might have been up late the night before and you might have went to a party with your parents, or things weren't good at your billets that you didn't get to eat the way you normally do. But what you can control is most of the time, if you have habits where your bedtime is roughly 10 o'clock, let's say, if you went to bed a couple nights at 12, well, that's kind of on you. If you didn't drink 10 of these a day, you drank one and you had 7 cappuccinos instead, then that's on you, right? If you went to Five Guys or A&W a few times that in the days prior to your performance, then that's on you. It's like so. There's certain things you still can control, and then there's times where it's just some days you're gonna be. Some days you're the hammer, some days you're the nail.
yeah, yeah. The Andyisms. Like I think tailing it back to me thinking about the run, I guess for me is establishing like a worst case baseline. So on your worst day, you are for sure confident that you can still do a certain set of things. So I remember actually Ryan Green. I remember him saying this when he was talking about this was like years ago. He was talking to me about like what level of fitness he wants to have. He's like, I want to be able to walk in the gym and clean 300 pounds on a bad day. When I feel like crap, I want to just be able to take for granted. I know for sure I can do that. When I was doing my run this weekend, I knew for sure that I was going to hit a certain time. Like I knew I was going to run it in under 2 hours, for example. I knew I'd run the half in under 2 hours. I knew that. So I which is fine, but that would be like my worst case scenario. So I knew going into the run, I'm going to finish this run in less than 2 hours. I know that. So from the hockey standpoint, it's get yourself to a position where you have a worst case. If I'm on my worst day, I know that I'll get the puck out. I know that I'll be able to do. I'll be able to back check hard. I know that I'll have awareness in my defensive zone. I know that I'll still be able to make decent tape to tape passes most of the time. I know those things, you know. And then if you have your worst game ever and you didn't score, you didn't get a point, or you had a bad turnover or whatever, you still had all these other pieces that contributed to a game where you're contributing to some degree, you know. And I think that's an important way to think about it, because I was thinking, even like going, like I said, going into this run, this was the first time in years that I felt like, okay, this is a test now, right? Like this is a test. All of my like when I work out, when I go to jujitsu, when I go to do any physical thing that I enjoy doing, it's never been like a contest. It's or any kind of competition. It's always just been I like to do it. I'm doing it for fun, whatever. Yeah, staying in shape. So this was the first time in since probably 2017 where I was like felt some butterflies, or like some nerves of, okay, this is a bit of a test now. I'm going to see how I stack up relative to someone else, you know? And for a lot of these kids going into these games, like this is what they feel every day, or what they feel a lot of games. Like, for example, we're going to the Tier 1 showcase in Chicago this weekend, which is like a heavily scouted event. And the kids know that, right? They're totally aware that it's going to be, a lot of people are going to be around watching those games. So when you're preparing to do, or you're preparing to go into that test mode, you want to have an established thing that you can take for granted. Like you want to be sure that I know when I shoot the puck that I hit the net most of the time. You know, I know that I always back check hard. I can take these things for granted. So when you get into these test modes, you're not feeling so much of that pressure. And it kind of goes back to my point at the beginning of like being able to perform under those circumstances, like you pointed out when your teacher came to watch or whatever. It just adds an element. It adds a mental element that for some reason presents another challenge that a lot of people, if not everyone, has more difficulty dealing with than if they were just doing it by themselves at home with nobody watching or whatever it is. You know, as soon as you put a stage there of some sort, or any kind of different element that isn't the norm, then now you're thinking. So
Yeah, some kids are not good with that.
yeah, and the younger they are, the less they get used to that. So like if you go to in the OHL, if you're watching Charlie, for example, like he's now played 200 games or whatever in front of scouts every single night. So that's comfortable for him now. Like he knows that he's out there getting watched every time, you know, or being watched every time. So if you don't have the ability to put yourself in that situation, then it's a good strategy to just make sure you can take some certain performance things for granted, so that when you go out there, you're still comfortable with your worst case performance, if that kind of makes sense, you know? So for me, it was super interesting. Like I was trying to map it back to when I would play, and like what that feeling is like going on the ice, being in front of people, and having to still deliver and perform. I don't know what that would have been like. I want you to kind of share your experience, like even going back to when you were being scouted or recruited for the OHL through minor hockey, whatever, in Sudbury. Like, what was it? What do you remember, if anything, of that time and what that felt like? Because I'm starting to realize I'm having trouble remembering what that feels like. Like I'm so relaxed about the high pressures and like talking to scouts and coaches and having to talk to new people on the phone, or um, figuring out how best to perform, or even like I watch kids do presentations in front of the class. And I'm like, guys, just relax. Like it's fine. It's not that hard, And I'm trying to.
Yeah,
I'm realizing that I'm starting to forget.
yeah.
So like if you could put yourself back.
For me, hockey was not. It was never the issue. Never hockey. Like if we went to tournaments, me and another guy on our team that was a year older than me, We got all our goal. We were the glue that held it together, right? We're a small town, and we'd go and win tournaments sometimes, and we're the dominant players most of the time. So I liked it.
Do you
I
remember
liked the
thinking
bigger,
it though? Do you
yeah,
remember like
100%.
knowing people were watching and you're being
Oh yeah,
judged and all that
oh
stuff?
yeah.
Do you remember all that?
I remember there was one coach from Kingston that was, or one scout from Kingston that was at all our games. Seemed like every time. So I wonder who's going to be standing today. I knew a lot of where the scouts were. And the difference back then was maybe because it wasn't there wasn't like it wasn't public back then. I knew what I wanted. I knew it was my underage draft year. I knew what I wanted and where I wanted to go. I was very driven to get there, and I did. I didn't care. I don't know, for some reason, I knew that I would play well. I just knew it because I guess really, why wouldn't I? I
You
loved
had
hockey.
the baseline piece of it though,
Yeah,
right?
I knew that. Yeah, and I knew that I would work as hard or harder than anybody on the ice, and I was fast, fairly fast, shifty, smart, gritty, skilled, back check. Like, I knew I would do all those things, and I didn't ever think that I wouldn't have a good game ever,
Yeah, that's so interesting, man.
ever.
Yeah,
Yeah, I guess, and that's ignorance is bliss.
yeah.
Maybe I should have,
Hmm.
but that's the thing, right? Is so so now comparing that to what you just said about someone giving a presentation, it's you fear things, right? So I'm not coming up with a theory. I'm just thinking like maybe maybe it has something to do with fear, right? Maybe it's a fear of failure might be the thing that holds people back and have not good performances, or have maybe not have good performances. Maybe it's the fear of failure, maybe it's the fear of being judged, maybe it's the fear of whatever. Because to me, I can see where someone would not do well or be relaxed in a situation where you're doing a public speaking or a presentation for a class, because the fear of what people think, the fear of looking like an idiot, right? All the fears of, right? Whereas if you're good at it and natural, not, I wouldn't say natural, but if that's what you've done all your life, then that presentation is probably not fearful. So why would you have anxiety about it? And why wouldn't you expect to have a really bang it, knock it out of the park presentation? Does that make sense?
It
And
does.
that's
Yeah.
and that's this is I didn't read this in a book, guys.
Yeah.
I'm writing my own right now. No,
Yeah.
that's I come up with that just because you said that using that comparison, and it's interesting because as I'm thinking about it, like, so playing hockey was never that. A lot of other things, I would say I had anxiety, or not anxiety. I would say that I had the thought pattern of, I hope I do well, and then you'd go up and down in your performance. I would say 100% that, and I would even say that in because there's so many different unknowns when you're running hockey camps and clinics and talking to people, like, or doing sessions. Like, the unknowns are, I mean, you can just say that, yeah, but it's a rink and it's hockey players. It's like, yeah, but there's different variables. There's parents. There's maybe different results at risk, different people working with you, and some things that you can't control. So I think maybe that's maybe in some sense that more that you can't control would lead to doubting yourself to having ultimate success. But when I knew I could count on me, I had never had. I shouldn't say never because I don't know if it was never, but I could say that I always counted on me when it came to playing hockey. And I would say for the most part, doing what we do now, I could count on me.
Well, because I could, and that's what's such an interesting contrast. Because I still remember when I was going through AAA, especially, like I was never a guy that had like I was never the coach's go-to guy, for example. So I was never fully confident playing. Like I didn't feel good. I remember most of the time not feeling good playing, like just not confident in myself. Not like,
Really?
yeah, like that
How
was
is it fun?
this is the
That's
this is
actually
what's
one of my questions. When I
yeah
see some of the players that have to really, really work hard to just accomplish very little,
yeah
as a hockey player, I'm not being judgmental. It's a legit question.
right.
Question. How is it fun?
So I think there's two things. Like I remember just the game itself, like in its pure form, was fun. So I remember like if I was just outside playing road hockey, it was fun. If I was just playing on the pond or whatever, it was fun. If I was in like the odd game, even like it was fun. But it didn't get fun. Honestly, I don't feel like it really got fun. My 1 year, I remember maybe 3 years of my entire time playing, I would categorize as fun. The rest of them were like,
Really?
yeah, the rest of them were like stressful. Yeah, I wouldn't use the word fun.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't have fond memories of
Are
like,
you like a masochist or something?
I swear to
Why
God,
did you play?
because the game was fun. Like
How the
it's like,
is it fun if you're not having fun?
okay, I'm not saying I wasn't having fun. I wouldn't describe it as fun. Like my go-to, I'm sure there were moments where it was really fun. Like, and there was games that were really fun, and there was that. But as a whole, like when I think about it, if I reflect like youth hockey, what do I remember of youth hockey? The first word would not be like that was so fun. That would not be one of my choices, right? It would be I remember it being stressful. I remember it feeling like unfair. I remember it feeling like disappointing. I remember it feeling um, like just something wasn't right. And it was a combination of variables, like me feeling pressure from my dad, my coaches being terrible, our teams being terrible, like uh, like those kinds of things all together made it not. It wasn't
Yeah,
like I really
guess
enjoyed
that
it.
makes sense.
So, but I guess my point is like trying to perform when that's what my mindset is and that's where my head is at as a kid was hard. And I have the contrast because I remember like those 2-3 years that I really did have fun. So like my midget major year and my second year of junior were probably my two best years of hockey. Those were fun. Those were like, this is fun. I'm like really having a fun time playing this game right now. And but what was going right during that time was like I felt like other people believed in me. It wasn't just me believing in me. It was like other people thought I was good and I was being put in positions to be good. Like I was given like go-to minutes. I was given and then I was also seeing success. I was capitalizing on those moments and I was doing well and I was getting attention and I felt like I was on the ladder to achieve what I wanted to achieve. 2 years out of my whole career playing. Then yeah, and then once I got to my last 2 years playing with the university, like my second last year, I remember debating stopping playing. And then after I did my final year, I was like, yeah, I'm good to not play anymore. And those were two of the most enjoyable years that I had. Not better than my top two, but they would probably be the next two. And it's because I didn't care anymore. It was because I didn't care. Like if someone came and told me I didn't play well, I'd be like, all right, like next game, try again. Like I didn't care. So it was like I was much more relaxed. My first year at the university, I wasn't, but my final 2 years, I was like, I'm going to just go out there and do the best that I can do. And if I don't score a goal, I don't care. If I do score a goal, cool. If I get penalties or whatever, that's great. If I block shots and contribute a lot, that's awesome. And I genuinely didn't have the worry anymore of like, I really need to be performing at my best. And like, I know for a fact, so many kids feel that, man. Like, so many kids have something.
So I'll share with you. So
Yeah.
no, this is awesome to me. So I still to this day, let me be honest. At the end of my life here, honest. I don't love hockey the way I love hockey before. Like not even close. In fact, I probably am more annoyed with everything that I see in hockey than anything. And I loved hockey, but like now but so the reason I do hockey is because obviously there's a passion there of some sort, but um, I just happen to be good at it now. Not as a hockey player, but I'm good at what I do. It's understand. But my whole life, and I'm talking my whole life, I can remember 4 years old. Like you might say, you didn't remember when you were
Yeah,
four,
yeah,
Andy.
yeah, yeah.
I do. I remember going down, playing on my first team at 4, and I remember before that being excited about going to the rink. Now that might not be a real memory, but I remember it. How am I saying this? It's not like I don't vividly remember, but
Yeah,
maybe it's just I remember doing
you know
it.
the feeling. It's like
But I
imprinted.
can tell
yeah.
you this: from 4 or 5 years old, because we had outdoor rinks up in my hometown. I didn't have a life where it was like shits and giggles all the time, right? It was like, and I'm not saying it was bad, but it was like there was a shit going on all the time. And I wasn't a very secure person as a kid, and I wasn't a very confident person as a kid. I shit my pants in grade fucking 3, right? And in grade, right?
We're on such a serious thread.
No, but it is serious. Like I did, like I had these emotional things going on, and I was like, I was insecure, and like, yeah, I remember Christina.
kept
That's
shitting my
this. You want to
pants.
see a funny?
Yeah.
So speaking of shit in my pants here, so here, guys, here's lay it all out for you. So I was sitting there in grade 3, and this girl that was Angela sat in front of me, and I had a crush on her.
Yeah.
Girl behind me was Christina.
Yeah.
So sitting there full diaper, and I feel, dude, you got to look at me. I feel on my back a tap. It's Christina, right? So I'm like, oh, I turn around to look at her. She goes, and I'm talking full diaper. So anyways, I've got like emotional stuff, but I'm telling you, I would go to the rink. And anytime I went to the rink and I was playing hockey or shooting pucks, it was like my own little world. And every game that I played, I loved being on the ice. I loved practicing. I loved everything about hockey. It was like my home. And it was really funny. And I know this sounds maybe like, okay, you're not Wayne Gretzky, of which I know. But I loved hockey so much. It was my safe place almost. You know what I mean? It was where I could be good. It was where I could be myself. It's where I could maybe, it was my way of expressing what was inside. Also, right? Um, shitting yourself is one way. It's one way to express. Mustache with a smoke, shit yourself, right? So, anyways, I think hockey was a way that I could express my love, my hate, everything. And I would go on the ice and I just felt at home. So it was funny when I was an adult. I'm still not an adult yet, but when I became an adult and I was not in hockey, and I took those 5-6 years, I think it was 6 years where I never touched the ice. I hated hockey. I didn't want anything to do with it. I use this term a lot. It's like being a fish out of water. You know, and I used to think that term was like just a phrase, but I was like, I actually do feel like a fish out of water. It's like something wrong. I didn't know what it was. I was like, I don't feel like normal. Like I'm walking around Earth, and you know, and look at what's going on. And then when I got back into my hockey world, I'm telling you right now, I walked into the rink and I'm like, God, I think I like hockey again. Anyways, when I started teaching again or getting back on the ice, it was like I went back into the fish tank. Here I am, and it's my safe place. It's my safe place. It's what I love. It's where I feel good, even though I'm not even good anymore. Um, I feel like I'm on the ice. Everything feels good. I can grab that puck, and my brain just goes into this wonderful, wonderful place. And I think that's why I mostly played well without anxiety and
Yeah.
had
Yeah, it
higher
makes sense, man.
performance. You know,
But I think
because I went to some games without anything in my stomach.
yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so it was like, how could you perform? But it was just something mentally that was there,
Well, I think
which is a nice story.
it is
That's
a
a nice story.
It is a nice
That's
story.
for everybody out there that thought
Yeah.
it was going to be a shit story. It's a
Yeah.
nice story.
No
Yeah,
pun
nice
intended.
little story, and I love it today. And I guess maybe that's my disconnect with some players. You know what I mean? My disconnect with some players is like, I don't understand how you could come to this freaking thing that I call heaven and church and God or whatever you call like that thing that makes me so happy and so um just that's where I need to be. I don't know how someone could come there and not have that same feeling as me and disrespect it in any way or or not give it the effort or
Yeah,
the love.
I get
Like,
it.
so for me, that's why that's my disconnect with a lot of players
Yeah.
is like, I don't understand you.
Yeah.
This
Well,
is
I
the
think
best.
because I've felt elements of both, like exactly what you're saying. I've felt that too, right? I have felt that at certain times. But I guess my summary like here is when I was doing my thing on Saturday, I just was reflecting on like that what it actually means to be able to perform at your best and all of the different variables that go into that. When you're talking about and key point is that I'm forgetting I can feel myself now forgetting what it's like to be 15, 16, know zero information, know zero things about what's to come over the next 4 years, not secure with myself yet, not secure with what I need to do and where I need to be. Like all of those unknowns, I'm forgetting what it's like to have those unknowns. And I'm constantly trying to remind myself when I'm engaging with the kids because I remember what it's like to have a coach that just couldn't give a rip if you're on the ice or not. You know, I remember what that feels like. I remember what it feels like to be the guy that always gets to go on the ice no matter what. You know, and that spectrum in between, like I remember those things when I focus on it. So as I'm now phasing out of one, like getting further and further away from playing and being in that position, I have to constantly bring myself back to remembering those feelings for when I'm engaging with the kids. And that's kind of my summary on this for today. Is like when we're judging, when we're the ones that have to, make decisions, judge, have conversations with from if you're a parent or whatever about the game, about the performance, about how they stack up in the competitive moments. Try if you've been in that situation, it's easier. But if you haven't, try to take our word for it. Like try to be aware of those things. Like you could be coming across the kid that was like you. You could be coming across the kid that was like me. There's a big spectrum there of and there's a lot of things that are going on for these kids that we don't know that are contributing positively or negatively to their performance. And even if everything was perfect, it's still really hard to perform. You know, it's still really hard to perform. So just
Dude, so
handling that with
we say that when we watch my kid and watch other players play. It's like so easy to say, "Ah, they're off today. He's off today." It's like the penalty power play is not working. It's like, yeah, but the penalty kill is real good too. You know, it's not. He doesn't have it today. It's like, no, they're playing really good hockey players. Like
yeah, for sure.
the other
Man.
guy's allowed to try too.
Yeah, seriously.
That's what's
yeah,
funny.
yeah, for sure. Okay, I gotta go, so I gotta cut it there. But hope that was useful. We'll see you guys next week.